So we are all peaceful countries, but we want to continue being peaceful countries. So that's why we established that defense capability together with the US. And US is an essential member of that alliance, so that link is crucially important. So of course we are interested in successful US. Of course we have a share in US's concern, whether it's China, whether it's other challenges that we face together. So that's why we are together here in Washington as NATO alliance to address any threat to any ally.
Well, it's you, though, among the allies that potentially are most immediately affected if Russia were to decide to move
NATO.
beyond Ukraine. But that, exactly, Article 5, theoretically, if
Absolutely.
Latvia or any other Baltic country, any country in the alliance were to be attacked, theoretically that would trigger all of the NATO forces coming together in a defensive way. How should we think about what that attack could actually mean? Knowing we've seen hybrid attacks, cyber attacks, for example, Russia has been conducting in the region.
And China.
China as well, moving buoys in the river that separates Estonia and Russia. How should we be quantifying what an Article 5 triggering event actually might be? Could it be something like that?
So the important part is actually to have that situational awareness, which means to have the intelligence reconnaissance capabilities to understand the threats. That means both on the Russian side, but also globally. It's about terrorists. It's about cyber attacks from wherever they can come. We have called out also Iran on cyber attacks. So it's important to have that situational awareness to be ready, because once you know what is happening, it's easier to respond. And this is where NATO together, we have invested so much. That's why we have that defense growth in terms of defense spending. That's why we have additional defense capabilities, and that means expensive technology, satellites. That means, reconnaissance capabilities. That means drawing all the data together, working with the private sector, giving back to the private sector contributing to that open source awareness. So it's a pretty complicated algorithm, but altogether as the alliance, it's not about the Baltic states. It's about whole of NATO, because we are in it together. And once we have that situational awareness, once we know what is threatening us or not, we are able to respond as necessary. So for now, there is no direct military threat to any of the allies, because we have invested so much work to make sure that we have that deterrence capability. And deterrence is what we are seeking.
Well, Minister, I know you're here to engage with the administration and your allies here at the Convention Center just a couple of blocks away from where we are. And you're not here to talk about Donald Trump, but there is a debate about redefining Article 5 right now if he were reelected, and he's called into question whether certain members would qualify for Article 5 protection based on their contributions. Are you concerned about, or do you expect Article 5 to be redefined if Donald Trump is reelected?
No, we don't expect that. We worked very well with the Trump administration before, and, we work with all the administrations, and I don't recommend to any politician to comment on another country's internal politics. But whoever is elected, we will work with him, her, them. And it's important for America to know that it has friends and allies. I mean, for all the countries, it's important to have those friends and allies. And there's no closer friend or allies at any country in NATO for America. And I think that's why also when President Trump was in power the previous time, it was very clear that there were all types of rumors that he would withdraw America from NATO and so on and so forth. But it never happened, because at the end, we are better off, stronger together. And as I said, currently the defense spending is at the rise as never before. 23 allies are about 2% of GDP on defense, and it will be rising.
Speaking of spending money on defense or other countries' defense, we don't only have questions about what this election means for potentially U.S. membership in NATO, but also the amount of money the U.S. is going to be willing to continue to provide to Ukraine. It was very difficult for Congress to get the aid passed earlier this year across the finish line. If the U.S. no longer provides that aid to Ukraine, what would that mean for other NATO countries if Ukraine is less in its ability to defend against the Russian invasion as a result?
Let me be straightforward. I think that it's in the U.S. interest to provide that aid, because most of the money, almost all of it, goes back into U.S. economy, in the U.S. defense industry, sort of increasing its own capabilities, research capabilities. Also in terms of lessons learned from the war in Ukraine. It's both the war of the past, but also a war of the future from what we are seeing with the drones, with targeting through mobile phones, with applications used for identifying the targets and so on and so forth. So I think all our military and defense industries are really working closely with Ukrainians to learn and prepare for those future wars that we might be faced with wherever. We don't know. We don't know where it can arise. So from that perspective, U.S. aid to Ukraine is a help to the U.S. itself to prepare for the future.
Do you expect to leave this summit with a clearer path for Ukrainian membership?
Listen, Ukraine is one of the strongest fighting forces in Europe today. I mean, it's a country, it's a power that has shown with the biggest army in Europe that it's able to defend itself. Yes, with the Allies' help, obviously, and that's will make NATO stronger. It will make America stronger once Ukraine joins
Should there
NATO.
be a timeline?
Possibly. Again, you know, it depends on the success on the battlefield. The sooner Ukraine is victorious and we can reach a deal on the end of the war, as sooner we can sort of finish financing the war. But very clearly also then we can have a sort of post-war architecture with Ukraine in it.
But effectively, the war needs to end first before any of that
Ukraine
can happen.
needs to achieve that victory, that it has to define what is a victory. Nobody else but Ukraine has to define what is a victory on the battlefield. And we have to be there to support them to achieve that.
What do you make of the conversation that we're having here in the United States about our president now, 81 years old, and questions about whether he has the mental acuity to continue, whether his counterparts in NATO think that he should continue in the job? What's your thought? What does Latvia
Well,
think
I've
about
met
this?
President Biden both when I worked at NATO and I look forward to seeing him tomorrow at the summit.
Yeah.
And I wish at age of 81 I would be as strong as he is. We all have our ups and downs, you know, at some moment. So
Sure.
I don't expect it to lead any kind of tragic outcome or anything. But quite clearly, American democracy will be able to handle all the challenges, and you will find the way through this or through other challenges. I don't doubt that, and you will be as strong as ever and as powerful as ever.
And so essentially what you're saying is the strength of the country is more about the country as a whole versus the figurehead?
Again, the figurehead is important, obviously. I mean, we all look up to
We
President
describe the
Biden
president
or
as
President
the leader
Trump
of the free
or-
world.
Absolutely. So it's very important. But in the same time, obviously, we all have our ups and downs, and we cannot predict when that happens. But I don't doubt that U.S. is as strong as ever.